All right. Well, my name is Susie Calypso, and I'm here with Stephen Lewis, Master Astrologer. Um, we've been friends since I've moved out to California, and he's guided me through many breakups, many very dramatic, very intense breakups, a lot of rock bottoms. Um, He's been there for me, and he has been the guiding force behind a lot of my success. I've confided in him on the right time to do things, the right people to work with, Sinistry readings on friendship, business partners, all kinds of stuff. So his type of astrology is the type that was used to advise kings and queens. And I finally convinced him to come out of the shadows and show himself. So, Stephen, welcome.
Thank you. My Pisces moon makes me shy, but my Leo sun makes me crave attention. So, I'm sort of conflicted, but definitely happy to share whatever I know about astrology with all of you tonight. And you're quite right. I specialize in medieval astrology, and it was used to counsel kings, dukes, caliphs, rajas, the movers and shakers of the ancient world. So what I try to do is maybe fuse the medieval techniques with modern techniques to calibrate them for modern living. Medieval astrology for modern minds might be a way to sort of tagline what I do.
Okay. So what is astrology?
That's an excellent question. If we break down the components of the word, it essentially means the language of the stars. Astro means stars, but the logi part comes from logos, which means speaking, writing, communicating, language. And when we look at any horoscope, a birth chart, or any other type of a chart, we are actually contemplating what the stars are telling us. And when I say what the stars are telling us, what I really mean is what an entire range of spiritual entities that the stars represent are telling us. So the stars are basically a shorthand for spirits, angels, principalities, demons, archangels, you name it, cherubs.
So most people are only familiar with sun sign astrology. And so when they find out that there's so many other elements and they see their birth chart for the first time, they're typically shocked and in awe. And so sun sign astrology is a joke. You can't figure out somebody's personality based off of just their sun sign. And so could you explain maybe to the newbies what each one of the planets, just a quick little, explanation of what each planet represents? Because most people know the sun as the ego.
Absolutely. And you know what? I have no qualm with that. It's the center of our consciousness, but it also represents strong masculine types of presences in our life, father figures, husband figures, royalty, very important people, honors. The sun is honors. So your sun placement shows where you can find honors and accolades. The moon, it's a symbol of emotions and your reactions, but it also is a more practical symbol of very important women, influential women figures. And when I say women, they could be any type of strong, powerful feminine energy. And the moon is also a representative of the people. It's a representative of the masses. There is just such a huge range of things that each planet can symbolize. It can't symbolize everything, but the possibilities are very vast. Mercury, for example, symbolizes our intelligence, our ability to speak, our consciousness, our ability to construct an identity. But it's also basic things like reasoning and calculating and recording. Venus, she is our ability to love, but she's also cheerfulness and sweet foods and games and pleasures of all kinds, and young women, and also effeminate people. Then we move to Mars, and Mars makes us angry. He's wrath in every nativity. One of the medieval astrologers, a Jewish astrologer named Avraham Ibn Ezra, kind of made a famous statement when he said Mars is wrath in every nativity. So that means that wherever Mars is in your chart, there will you find an angry person or something that makes you angry. But aside from that, he's soldiers, police officers, criminals, people who cut things like butchers, barbers, the guy or the gal who works in the deli. That's a Mars type of person too. Anybody who works with fire, like a baker. So you see what I mean? These planets unify a lot of meanings. Then we move to Jupiter. He is abundance and wealth and children. In the Middle Ages, he was a symbol of children and fertility. And later tonight, when we talk about Ukraine, I'll bring up Jupiter again because he specifically symbolizes rebels, interestingly enough. But also people like judges, senators, the wealthy. And then we get to Saturn, and he's a very serious sort of an energy. He's called the Lord of Karma, in the sense of he represents a burden a fear that we have to make peace with, a challenge in our life that we have to overcome. And again, his symbolism is vast: the grave, waste places, abandoned places, restriction, but also some positive things like setting boundaries and so on. And then we move to the outer planets: Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. Uranus, I like Uranus because he represents that aha moment, that eureka moment, when you suddenly understand how hot can be cold and cold can be hot, where Uranus represents that sort of connection to the divine, where you just get this genius insight just like that. Neptune represents dissolving yourself and becoming one with all. Just dissolving your boundaries. So when we talk about an experience where we ingest a sacred medicine that allows us to experience the death of the ego, that is a quintessential Neptune experience. And then we get to Pluto, one of the most maligned and confused astrological principles in the entire pantheon. Pluto represents a decay and a disintegration, but also a rebirth out of the mulch that results from decay. So in a nutshell, these are some of the basic meanings of the planets. And when we look at a chart, we're looking, of course, at a sort of a map of your mind, but we're also looking at all of the other players in your life as well: mom, dad, sister, brother, friends, enemies, frenemies, lovers, spouses, bosses, subordinates, the whole nine, children, everything. So the planets represent all of that. The Susie Calypso story, starring Susie Calypso and co-starring the rest of the planet, the rest of the world. The planets represent all of that, all of the actors in life.
Yeah. So for the newbies, what can astrology be used for? Because I know there's I think there's 144 different types of astrology.
Yeah, and probably even more than that.
Yeah.
Some of the main applications, astrology has different branches, and most of us are familiar with birth chart astrology, sometimes called natal astrology, where you bring me a birth chart and I make predictions on the past, present, and future. And when we do natal astrology, we look at your chart and we see everything, just like that, in one hammer strike of cognition, beginning, middle, and end. Boom, within seconds, you can see it all. And this is this astrology we do when people ask, am I going to get married and when? Am I going to have children and when, and how many? And am I going to be lucky through those children? What kind of children are they going to be? What kind of spouse am I going to be? What should I be doing in life? What's my calling? What's my profession? On and on and on. Am I going to get money? When is the money going to come? Like the old salsa song goes, ¿Cuánto llegará el día de mi suerte? When is my lucky day coming? Astrology answers that question. Specifically, natal astrology answers that question. But then we can shift gears, right? If your birth chart shows a lot about you, can't we engineer a chart for something that we want to be born? There's that type of astrology as well. Intentionally creating a chart, starting an enterprise at a lucky hour so that the entire life of that enterprise will fall under your control to the extent that it can. Now, this can be a business, it can be a marriage, it can be a website, it can be a child. There are children on this earth who I helped engineer through astrology by recommending when the parents should, do the horizontal bop. I get that sort of assignment all the time. And it works. And then there's another branch of astrology where you ask questions. You don't need your birth chart for this, because a question that you might have, am I going to buy this house? When? You know, this type of question also has a gestation process and is born, just like any other living creature is born. And so we can ask a question of the heavens and do a chart for the heavens at that moment. And the answer to our question lies in that chart. Then there's mundane astrology, the astrology of geopolitics in the world, of countries and nations. Then there's magical astrology. So
speaking of mundane astrology, what is your interpretation on what is going on with Ukraine? All this crazy madness. Are we looking at World War III?
No, certainly not. Absolutely not. I'm quite positive of that. I don't think we have to worry about that. Based upon the charts I'm looking at, and again, you know, I'm not some political think tank genius, but looking at the charts, I'm pretty sure that if anybody tried to pull a nuclear trigger, they would get assassinated before that could happen. Nobody's going to allow the nuclear ball to drop here. You know what I mean? And if it comes to a conventional warfare involving the United States, that certainly we would mop that up in no time. I think it's pretty clear that there is no significant military threat going on now.
When do you think World War III will happen?
Well, I think that the next important American war will happen when Uranus gets into Gemini. And that's going to be in 2026. That doesn't mean war is going to break out then. First of all, Uranus is going to like dip its toe into Gemini in 2025 for a little bit, and then retrograde back into Taurus and fully get into Gemini in 2026. But, you know, ever since World War II, most of the American wars have been basically an ammunition sale. You know what I mean? An occasion to sell weaponry. That's all. When Uranus gets into Gemini, there's going to be a conflict that's of a different stripe entirely. It's going to be one that involves our morality. It's not going to be just an ammunition blowout sale. It's going to be a fight for our survival, a fight for our very soul.
Wow.
You know, that's when I'm expecting it to happen, through Uranus's transit through Gemini. And that's going to be it's going to go from 2026 to 2033. So, you know, we could drill down and find out the specific year, you know, but my Pisces moon prevents me from doomsday prepping. You know what I mean? I'm too lazy for that. If the end's going to come, I'm like, so be it. You know, I'll just take a nap. That's what my Pisces, I mean, I'm very Neptunian. You want to dissolve my ego with the push of a button? Go right ahead. You know, I'll just open my eyes on another sky on some other, in some other dimension.
So what do you think is going to happen with Ukraine? Do you think they're going to be taken over? Do you think there will be peace?
Yes, I'm pretty sure there's going to be peace. I uploaded some charts on the Instagram, show the charts that I think are pertinent to the war that's going on right now. And very complex question, because in one of those charts, the chart for 2022 to 2023, Jupiter is in Pisces. And to me, this does symbolize a peace process, but, you know, it's not going to be, I think, the ideal peace. I mean, because right now it's in sort of an in-between state. Russia is not winning the war, but Ukraine is not losing the war either. It's kind of in a gridlock. And so, you know, Russia's going to prevail eventually. They're going to grind them down and install some sort of a marionette government, a puppet government. But looking at the 2022 to 2023 chart that I uploaded, you know, I think that the Jupiter in Pisces shows a fairly vibrant rebellion that is bolstered by foreign aid. And this is very interesting to me, because we did this song and dance with Russia back in the Afghanistan conflict. And I'm sure, you know, I wasn't old enough to remember, but I'm sure there was an outpouring of support and sympathy for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan at the time. And of course, it was those very Mujahideen who became public enemy number one in the early aughts, you know, when the World Trade Center bombing happened. You know what I mean? So that's always a provocative question. If we get involved in this conflict, could it happen that down the road, when Uranus gets into Gemini, you know what I mean? People flip sides. Anything's possible. You know, when we do astrology, we have to approach the any problem-solving situation with some humility, admitting that we don't know. We have to start from a place of total ignorance and then allow the charts to guide us. So I do think there will be peace, but I don't think that the Ukrainians will be happy with the peace that is brokered.
Interesting. So what do you think about the Sinistry between Putin and Zelensky?
You
I know Putin is quite the villain with that Scorpio rising.
Well, you know, we have to be fair here because Scorpio rising is one of the most widespread rising signs north of the equator. I mean, it takes well over 2 hours for the sign of Scorpio to rise. So there are a lot of folks out there with Scorpio rising. I think what makes President Putin special is not only that, but he's got Venus rising in Scorpio, which presents some challenges, and he has a massive stellium in the 12th house, which in medieval astrology is a difficult house. Again,
doesn't that signify bad karma, heavy karma?
Well, you know, it can't aspect the rising sign. None of these planets in his 12th house, it does signify some heavy karma. That's a modern approach, but the medieval approach says it's a place of sickness, a place of, you know, private enemies, people who smile in your face but want to stab you in the back as soon as they can. It's a place of actions that we do to get in our own way, actions that confine us. It's the house of the prisoner. Like when we do practical astrology and we want to say, hey, is this guy, and I have had plenty of clients who have been incarcerated. You know, that's a matter of the 12th house. And, you know, President Putin was a KGB agent, you know, and so we would expect the secrecy of the 12th house to come into play here, all of these planets in the 12th house to come in, you know, we would expect some sort of KGB agent to have such a packed 12th house, absolutely. But the reason why it's so difficult is because planets in the 12th cannot aspect the rising sign itself. It's a semi-sextile type of an aspect. And so the ascendant, the rising sign, is the place of life. It's us in this, you know, if the horoscope were a game board, you know, the piece that represents us, the game piece that represents us is the ascendant and its ruler. And the 12th house cannot see that. So it represents stuff that's going on in our peripheral vision that we can't really see. And if we were to consider these planets as representing actual specific people, like we were talking about in the earlier part of the live stream, then in the 12th house of enemies, Putin has several enemies. There's the sun, a very important person. This sun is in fall in Libra, so Putin is ignoring him. Then there's Saturn, an old man. Then there's Neptune, probably, that one's hard to call, you know, maybe an artist. Maybe Neptune is a symbol for the artist class. You know, they always protest against President Putin. And then there's Mercury, you know, a young man, some young fellow. So these would be the enemies of Vladimir Putin. Now, President Zelensky, his Pluto is at 16 degrees of Libra. And President Putin's Saturn is at 17 degrees of Libra. So those planets are conjunct. This is very difficult in chart comparisons, otherwise known as Sinistry. And if we look at President Zelensky's Saturn at 28 Leo, it is conjunct President Putin's Pluto at 22 Leo. So the upshot is that both of these gentlemen, their Saturns are conjoining their Plutos. And, you know, you see this in parent-child relationships that are extremely difficult. And you see this in romantic relationships that are also not going to last because they're manipulative, violent, restrictive. And so, yeah, these are definitely the charts of two enemies. The comparisons definitely don't stop there because President Putin's Mars at 26 Sagittarius is conjunct the descendant of President Zelensky and is opposite to the Jupiter of Zelensky. So these two individuals were definitely born to hate each other. And sadly, you know, President Zelensky has a very difficult chart. You know, I don't want to.
He's definitely a favorite.
Oh yeah, he's he's certainly loved. I think that's, you know, he's got a nice Sun-Venus conjunction that might explain some of his, you know, celebrity and his appeal to the masses, certainly. But Saturn rules his Sun and his Venus. And Saturn actually rules his midheaven, which is for a ruler, for a president, a politician. The midheaven is the basis of your authority, the basis of your rule. And so to have the ruler of the midheaven in detriment in the fourth house is a telltale sign of a downfall.
Oh.
Saturn is in detriment in Leo. Saturn in Leo, wherever house he's in, what he's promising is that the affairs of that house are going to at some point disintegrate. And the things
so do you see a very unpleasant death for him?
Ooh. Well, we don't want to predict or the death of any public leader. I mean, and I say this out of an abundance of caution, because imagine you're living in the 14th century and you love your astrology professor to death, right? You go to the University of Bologna, you're actually taking university level astrology courses, but oops, your astrology professor says something untoward about the ruler, and so when you're walking across campus, you get to see the poor bastard get burnt to death. And right there in the campus quad. It happened all the time. Grisly, gruesome endings because some astrologer or the other was unwise enough to go too far talking about a political leader. Now, nothing like that's going to happen to me here, but it's just, you want to be careful. But to answer your question, kind of, yeah.
Yeah. I figure with that Saturn in Libra, or Saturn in Leo.
Yeah, well, the Saturn is also, looking at Zelensky's chart here, the Saturn is also kind of ruling the house of mortality. You know what I mean? So it's a significator of very, very morbid and difficult things. So for it to be angular in one of the angles, this takes this bad planet and gives it a lot of power. It makes it very visible. So, I mean, Jesus, if I were in Vegas right now laying down a wager, you know what I mean? We might not want to go there, but we'll see how it turns out. He's understandably a hero, and I definitely wish him the best. I certainly do.
He's definitely lion-hearted. I'm rooting for him.
For sure, yeah. I'm not gonna, tangle with Putin. You know what I mean? So he's certainly a brave fellow. He's making the best rather out of his time on the world stage. He's comporting himself very well, and he has a lot of support. And it just breaks my heart that all of this has to happen. But I think President Putin, he was able to take Georgia, Crimea, and I think he expected this to be kind of business as usual in carving up parts of Eurasia and Eastern Europe. And I think he may have been surprised at the response now that he has invaded Ukraine. I think.
Thank you. Thank you for that description.
Yeah, sure. I'm praying for everybody.
So for most modern astrologers, when you go on these Facebook groups, everybody's saying that we have just entered into America's first Pluto return.
Yes.
And so would you like to give your insight on that?
Sure. Sadly, I meant to upload the birth chart of the United States of America. I'm kind of new to Instagram, so that fell through. Easily Googleable. But here we run into our first problem, because if you ask 10 different astrologers, what is the birth chart of the United States of America? You're going to get several different answers. Astrologers cannot come to a consensus on what the birth chart actually is. And this is important because we need to know what Pluto is promising in the birth chart. These planets in a chart are making a promise. That's the basis of a prediction. But probably the most widespread chart would be what's called the Sibley chart that has Sagittarius rising. And so Pluto would be in the second sign, Capricorn. And so when there's a Pluto return, then any planetary return, it goes around the zodiac and comes back to the same exact degree a minute that it had at the birth. And when it does that, it renews what it meant in the birth chart. It replenishes its promise. It is emphasized. And so in the American nativity, the one that most people probably use, Pluto is a financial significator. He means something pertaining to money because of his house placement, because of his sign placement. And so one thing I think it means, terrible discrimination on a financial level, not the kind that we see now, but I think that in the not too distant future, we're going to have we're going to have multiple types of currencies. We already have that now, but what I think is that the lower stratum of society is going to be forced to deal with paper currency of some sort or their debit card. And the cryptocurrencies are going to be like a conglomeration of gated communities. You know what I mean? It's almost like that old superstition about the mark of the beast. In order to buy and sell, you're going to have this type of cryptocurrency, that type of cryptocurrencies. And so the have-nots are going to be forced to traffic in good old-fashioned paper currency, and the drift is going to be away from real things into cryptocurrencies and these abstract concepts like non-fungible tokens. You know what I mean? Which sounds like something out of Star Trek or Star Wars or something, but it's like a thing. And I think that's what's going to happen. I really do. Yeah, I think that most social problems will stem from the divide between what types of currency we have. And they say that cryptocurrency is not possible to regulate, but my prediction is that it's going to regulate itself, and it's going to have a social cachet to it. You know, your social weight, your role in society is going to be determined by what cryptocurrencies you're affiliated with. The things you can buy will be determined by what cryptocurrencies you have access to, and that's going to cause a social discrimination, the likes of which I don't think we've ever seen before. And Pluto also, modern astrologers say he rules Scorpio. You know, I think we could have a gentlemanly debate about that, but if that's the case, then his return will also stimulate Scorpio in the United States birth chart. And that's the 12th house. We mentioned a little bit about the 12th house, downfall, secrets. I'm not saying that the Pluto return is signaling a downfall for the United States. I think that sort of rhetoric is certainly very immature. You know, I think it's wishful thinking on the part of a lot of masochistic Americans and other people who dislike America and think, oh my God, you know, it's in decline. It's going to, you know, go south. It's going to die and all this. I think that's a little premature.
I think I look at it as the annihilation of old tradition and the rebuilding of new ones, not necessarily like the downfall of a nation.
That's a good way of looking at it. I definitely think also that Pluto is a significator of what we might call, I guess, feminism and feminine power. You know, most people refer to Pluto as a he, but one of my favorite astrologers, Liz Green, she wrote an outstanding book called The Astrology of Fate, and she made a very good case for the idea that Pluto is, in fact, a feminine energy along the lines of Kali or Ereshkigal or Tiamat. You know, this all-powerful, omnipotent, feminine force. And so in other empires, in their Pluto returns, we definitely see a feminine emphasis in their Pluto returns. For example, in the Roman Empire, during one of their Pluto returns, the various emperors were assassinated along with their mothers. You know, the mother was such a powerful figure over the emperor that she was also assassinated. In the British Empire, we have the rise of Queen Elizabeth during one of the British Pluto returns. So, you know, I think with this Pluto return, we're definitely going to see the entrance of the first of many women American presidents.
And the rise of the divine feminine.
Oh, without a doubt. Pluto, certainly. I mean, you know, I don't know. I'm kind of an old dude. You know what I mean? I come from the generation where Mama was like, I brought you into this world and I'll take you out of it. You know what I mean? That's Pluto in a nutshell right there. You know, she brought you in here and she will definitely take you out. You know, she's Kali, the creatrix of life and the one who pulls the plug when it's all done. You know. Okay, so you mentioned that you could get into an argument with modern astrologers about who the ruler of Pluto is. Who do you think? You think that it's in Scorpio? Well, I think Mars rules Scorpio.
Okay.
That's the traditional ruler of Scorpio. And I don't think we have enough information about Pluto. First of all, I think the question really requires us to understand what does it mean for a planet to rule a sign in the first place. So in order for the argument to be intelligible to me, we would have to agree on basic concepts of what it means for a planet to rule a sign. And in my training, I was taught that the planet and the sign are extensions of each other, and that the rulership of the sign has a lot to do with the element, the gender of the planet, and its relationship to the domicile of the luminaries, which certainly sounds like a mouthful. But once you understand these concepts, then you'll also get a lot of other esoteric bonbons, a lot of other treats. If we had the time, I could point out to you how, for example, if you imagine in your mind, right, imagine a chart where Cancer and Leo are on the left side, like in the first house position, then the signs relative to Cancer and Leo, I did a post about this on Instagram a little bit ago. They line up relative to Cancer and Leo in a way that not only defines the aspects, but helps us to understand who rules the sign. But it's very complicated. We can think of it in terms of, again, element and gender, and we don't know these things about Pluto. We don't know if it's a fiery planet, a watery planet. We don't know if it's a masculine energy, a yang energy, a yin energy, So we have this confusion when it comes to Pluto. And so the jury's still out. However, this is astrology. It's not thoracic transplant surgery. It's not organic chemistry. If something works for you in your interpretation, by all means, go with it. I would not hesitate to say that Pluto is connected to Scorpio if it felt right and if it fit the moment that I was in, if it fit the analysis that I was doing. So I'm not prepared to say it's not ruling Pluto, but ruling Scorpio, but it's safer for me in doing practical astrology to say that Mars rules it.
Okay.
Mars rules it. Yeah, and the Scorpio Mars is a very different type of Mars than the Aries Mars. So I would prefer to have a more sophisticated understanding of this type of Mars than to invite Pluto in and say, well, he rules over Scorpio, and we're going to take that away from Mars.
They can't share?
I'm sorry?
They can't share?
Hmm.
I mean, because Aquarius is ruled by Uranus and Saturn.
Well, as an evil astrologer, I'd say Saturn rules both of those domiciles because, Aquarius is opposite Leo, so that's the daytime Saturn, but Capricorn is opposite Cancer. So in this way, Saturn gets to be against or opposite both of the domiciles of the luminaries, you see. And I've just noticed, again, the sign is an extension of a planet. So I've noticed in people's lives, looking at their charts and how their lives play out, that this is the case, that Aquarius indeed, in a practical sense, is connected to Saturn, and Scorpio, in a practical sense, is connected to Scorpio, and Jupiter, in a practical sense, is connected, whereas an extension of Pisces. And this all calls upon the dayness or nightness of the chart. It amazes me how we as astrologers fail to account for that one basic distinction. Was this person born during the day or the night? To me, this seems elementary. But once we really get into investigating this idea of dayness and nightness, then an entire world of interpretation opens up to us. Because if there's a daytime planet in a nighttime chart, then it's signifying something a little out of place, something that might have competency issues. And so, addressing these matters gives us an extreme refinement of interpretation that I have really found to be extremely useful in my career as a predictive or a judicial type of astrologer. When we try to do psychological astrology, that's a different kettle of fish altogether. I'll wear a different hat for that. And when I do psychological astrology, sure, I have no problem giving Scorpio over to Pluto, or Aquarius to Uranus, or Pisces to Neptune.
So I know in a lot of the astrology groups, people argue all the time. Somebody will post a birth chart and ask, is this person a rapist? Is this person an abuser, and all that stuff? And then people are like, you can't see that in a chart. And I always feel like you can. So what is your take on being able to see psychological disorders and abuse or even serial murders
Yeah,
in a birth chart.
I would say that the person who says you can't do it is right and wrong at the same time, because probably the individual who's commenting can't do it. You know, I would hate to think that, you know, Joe Blow from Kokomo was diagnosing me as, you know, a homicidal maniac looking at my chart if he didn't know what he was doing. You know what I mean? Like, you know, it's kind of like karate. You can know just enough of it to get your ass kicked. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's definitely possible. If you know what you're looking for, absolutely. The charts of serial killers tend to be pretty distinctive with recognizable signatures. And, you know, everything good and bad in life has a place in the horoscope. Now, you know, people say, are serial offenders born or are they made? My answer to that is that they are born to be made, quite frankly. And when we're talking about sexual aberrations of the kind that would, you know, compel someone to go out and commit a series of homicides, then we're talking about an addiction that cannot be denied. It just can't be denied. And so it's a very fate-based thing. It's driven by fate, you know. So yeah, I definitely believe that you can see serious psychopathy, sociopathy, criminality in a birth chart. Absolutely, if you know what you're looking for. Definitely.
So I saw this meme that had all the serial killers, and it went Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and just repeat.
Yeah.
So to me, I mean, mutable signs are the chameleons. They're the adaptable ones. They can fit in anywhere.
You know, the medieval term for the mutable signs were classified as bicorporeal, meaning made up of two bodies. They were called double-bodied, multi-bodied signs, and you know that speaks to the criminal's ability to blend into society, specifically the serial offender's ability to not only blend into society, but to compartmentalize her or his psychology. You know what I mean? To compartment, you know, to troll the streets at night looking for victims, and then during the day, you know, go to class or go to work, interact with the family, and things of that nature. So because the mutable signs show something that is made up of multiple features and multiple bodies, then it's easy, you know, it's easier for these offenders to compartmentalize what they're doing. And yeah, I think there's definitely an overrepresentation of serial killers in the mutable signs. But, you know, again, we're talking about sun sign astrology. You know, we want to look also at things like the ascendant, the rising sign. You know, Ted Bundy, for example, had a lot of planets in immutable Sagittarius, but he also had a really nasty Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Leo that was rising. It was in the 12th house side of the rising sign, and that certainly also played a role too. A lot of serial killers have an emphasis on the third house as well, because not only, as you pointed out to me once in an earlier conversation, the third house is the mind and the functioning of our intellect, but it's also the local neighborhood. And so when we talk about trolling behaviors, that's definitely a third house sort of a situation. Bundy,
I remember you said Jeffrey Dahmer had the Venus conjunct Jupiter in the third house.
Oh,
and looking at that, you would think that would be a good thing, but you said it was a good thing for him.
Yeah, we're talking about Bundy.
Okay.
Yeah, Bundy had Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury in the third house. And, you know, your question was, well, shouldn't that have made him a choir boy? Shouldn't that have been nice? And, you know, the answer is like, yeah, it's lucky for Ted Bundy. You know, and all of these planets were in Scorpio. So we're talking about a sexualized Jupiter and Venus, perhaps, and Mercury. And again, you know, we're dealing with an astrology of types. So when Bundy would go on his hunting expeditions, he would run across Venus types, Jupiter types, and Mercury types. You know, and Jupiter was simply saying that he was going to get lucky. lucky according to him. You know, Bundy's idea of a hot date involved bludgeoning and decapitation and necrophilia and God knows what else. You know, just terrible things. You know, that was just part of his paraphilia, and he couldn't control it. You know, but the interesting thing is that Scorpio was also the fourth whole sign in his chart. So there was this blending of the third house and the fourth house going on there too, which is very.
So you have a book that you're actually writing on this.
I'm calling it The Fever Factory. It's going to be about the psychology of serial killers, and it's going to look at serial killing. It's going to focus specifically on the period from 1970 to the turn of the century, because that was probably the most prolific era for serial killers. You know, yeah, and then I might even make it a multi-volume series where volume 2 is going to deal with the astrology of spree killers like Andrew Cunanan. Volume 3 might deal with the astrology of mass murderers, you know, like the Columbine assailants. You know, the next volume might deal with the astrology of cult leaders, like, you know, perhaps Charlie Manson, Jim Jones, maybe even, God forgive me, L. Ron Hubbard. You know, don't tell the Scientology Church I said that. They might call me a repressive person or whatever the hell. You know what I mean? I might go outside and see, you know, somebody surveilling me now that I said that. But, you know, then maybe another volume about natural disasters, you know, family annihilators like Chris Watts and people like that. You know, basically, I'm kind of fascinated by the astrology of stuff going awry, the astrology of stuff going wrong. You know, that's the most destructive kind, and it's just interesting to me. I'm stimulated to think about the spiritual necessity of these phenomena. You know, both in terms of the offender and the victim.
So when is your book going to be ready and published?
That's an excellent question. I'm drafting it now, the rough draft now, so it's going to take me probably 3 months to go through the first draft, and, you know, another 3 months to edit it. So probably about 6 months to 8 months.
Okay. Looking forward to that. I know you've been working on it hard, and I get to get little details of it every now and then. So I was thinking maybe in about another month or so, we could do another live stream on Sinistry, romantic Sinistry.
Count me in. I love doing chart comparisons, Sinistry, do them all the time. And, you know, you can do them not only for spouses and partners, but for family members, you know, co-workers and things like that. It's a really useful tool. Absolutely. Yeah. Love to do that.
So, Stephen, before we end this, would you like to share what services you offer? You also do tarot reading, and you are one of the best tarot card readers. He just gave me a tarot card reading on frenemies, fake friends. It was so on point. So for the newbies, can you explain to them what tarot is?
Yes, tarot is a system of divination by cards. Basically, finding out things that you have no way of knowing using 78 cards, each one of which has, they're usually pictorial. They have some sort of a picture on them, but the power of the tarot is that it draws on so many metaphysical and occult systems, such as the Kabbalah, numerology, the fixed stars, astrology. So we could have a really interesting conversation about the astrology behind the tarot and the correspondences. Tarot and astrology go together like raw tuna and rice. They are perfect. They perfectly complement each other. And the only difference is tarot is a little bit less analytical and more, it's closer to whatever spiritual currents underlie reality. I like to compare seeing the future with tarot to driving down the road at night with headlights. You know, you can see a certain distance. All you need to get to your destination. And astrology is like a drone where you see the entire landscape spilling out in front of you. So they have different applications, but I'll tell you, when I do tarot, that's when I get those goosebumps, feeling a presence in the room. You know, I kind of creep myself out a little bit doing that. Like, you know, I'm not alone here. Something's watching me. I feel that watcher at the boundary. So much with tarot.
So what do you think the energy is behind guiding the cards?
Oh, it's you. Sadly, I'm just a middle person. You know what I mean? The truth is there's an entity inside of you that has all of the answers already, that knows everything, has infinite intelligence. And that same infinitely intelligent being inside of you also dwells inside of me, dwells within all the people who are listening and watching us right now. It connects us. It's a connective tissue, a spiritual connective tissue that unites us all. And tarot allows us to open a window onto that being. That's the power of the tarot.
So I'm going to ask, before we head off, if any of the people watching have any questions for Stephen. So if you have any questions, go ahead and feel free to ask.
Feel free, hit me with them. I love answering questions. That's why I got into astrology in the first place. We're all seeking answers of some sort. And by the way, that's one of the most powerful types of astrology I love to do. The astrology, that the question of why was I born? What's my purpose here? You know, why was I born? What's my spiritual task? Where did I come from? I definitely love doing past life astrology and future life astrology. Where am I going? You know.
Tell us more about the TOAF, toad. So we will, this is